Even as a youth, Dada and I, we wanted to be the biggest sound system in the world. And it was more or less having the plot. How are you going to do that? I guess Soul to Soul in its entirety could have only happened here in London. And that was because of that level of innovation and creativity that exists around these concrete pillars. Put your ideas out there, be open-minded, and just believe that collectively you'll gain a lot more than you would as an individual.
I'm Adrian Sykes, and this is Union Black, an online multi-format content series across YouTube and Google Arts and Culture, featuring a curated collection of videos, audio documentaries, podcasts, stories and photographs. Each series takes us on a journey celebrating the contributions of Black British music artists, creatives, professionals and scenes. Told by the Black British music community, these stories will demonstrate the undeniable influence and impact of Black British music and culture in the UK and beyond. Go check out all the Union Black content on Google Arts and Culture at goo.gle/Union Black. The Black British Producers Behind Global Album series is a piece of 4 visualised podcasts that will spotlight a cross-generation of Black British music producers who've had international impact. On this particular episode, we're talking to the legendary Jazzie B. This is Union Black. We are talking about the great Black British producers that produce global albums. Let's talk about the music. Let's talk about the moment that really kind of started off, and let's move through the singles. You should tell this story because these moments are just seeded in Black British culture. Let's start, of course, with Fair Play, because that was, I mean, I can remember as an A&R guy hearing that and it dropping. I was like, down in the club, I was like, what is this? What is this? What was, when you put that play on for the first time, tell me what you felt like, and then talk us through that journey from there on out.
Well, it was the catalyst that kind of helped to break what we were or the journey that we wanted to take. So it was the ticket to the journey we wanted to take. And within that realms of the ticket, it did conjure up everything that we were about at the time. And technically, if you break it down musically, it's a groove. That's kind of infectious. And at the time, being a fan of, all the different producers and the music that was inspiring me, it just seemed to capture the essence of everything that was going on at the time. And I guess with the skills of everybody around, we were able to bring it to, because the dubs and the mixes I was playing before were all like mainly cassettes that I'd run in the dance.
Right.
And that's because we were developing it, and every time we used to use it as to help to tune up the sound.
Oh, right, okay.
Right, so the groove of that is how all that thing started. And initially, if you came to Africa Centre, you would have heard Fair Play before we voiced it. It would have had the speech on it, Martin Luther King, I Had a Dream, or somebody would be emceeing or singing on top of it. So quintessentially, it's a special. And again, that's why I was kind of brave enough to make a suggestion that if we were going to be the biggest sound system in the world, how would you do it? And I just had this bright idea to do it with our dubs. And that's really how it started. And in a very strange way, that's what made it simple enough for us to do it, because we were creating concepts with the records we were making at the time, hence calling the records Club Classics. And what had happened with the music as it evolved, we were involved in as well. So basically, I had a way of putting out our ideas. Yeah, that's how I kind of looked at it. And then the rest of it had to be packaged as you're going into this music business. And I guess that's how I managed to navigate it around in those early days, The first record, was actually a double A side, and commercially Feel Free was what was released to keep Virgin and that side of it in some kind of perspective. The deal was supposed to be two singles with an album, and I knew a little bit about the A side issues and so on and so forth. So on the other side was Fair Play. And I was able to feed both markets, knowing all the DJs and stuff that had frequented me for the last sort of 10 years prior to us doing that, and then seeing how the scene changed. And again, our position, we were one of a few bootleggers. Mr. Palmer and Jetstar were very good to me, very good to me, very good to me. I mean, that was, again, one of my sources of inspiration. So I always big up Mr. Palmer and Jetstar. Alongside Buster and all the other guys that were before me, they were all part and parcel of putting the concept together and knowing what I didn't want from putting out the record. And basically the potential of what was there.
I mean, listen, when Fair Play came out, I was working in a record company. I was one of many men chasing you down at the time. Our old friend, God rest him, Mick Clark, was the lucky recipient of your signature. How was that experience for you within Virgin, kind of working as someone who's always been entrepreneurial, a free spirit, been able to kind of do what you wanted to do? How was it being working inside a label for the first time, and how receptive were they to giving you your head for you to allow you to do what you wanted to do?
One of the great things about the relationship with the subsidiary label 10 Records of Virgin was definitely Clarky. I mean, rest in eternal peace. Yeah, he was one of a kind. But probably the conduit, which was Keith Borton, who got the deal through, and naturally my relationship with Nelly. I guess we were the prime candidates for this scenario at the time. But I chose Virgin because they had a series of records called Frontline.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And they were 99 pence, and they were really quality stuff and everything. And which I did end up working with Chris anyway. Ireland was really a cliche when it came down to the black scenario. Plus, they already had, I think Ireland had at the time Steel Pulse, which I was a massive fan of, and they already had Aswad.
Yeah.
So I just needed to be a big fish in a small pond, and Virgin was right underneath that. And I think their ideology kind of suited me a little better as well, because they were sort of left of centre. And I can't remember anything being too difficult there. Jeremy Lascelles, I think, was running the business at the time. He was always miffed of why we needed this, that and the other. There's a great quote, which I can say now. In them days, there was one floor and there were partitions separating all the little booths of the labels. And I remember Keith going to Jeremy for a couple of quid, asking him to make a video. And then him sort of saying to Keith in a few words, why the hell does a black dance act need to make a video? And that was nearly perfect, because there was nothing sinister in that, in just the fact that they're a subsidiary label, they're a dance act. What dance act makes a video? Well, we do. And that was an interesting thing, because the difference between somebody throwing their toys out the pram or using that to their advantage, which is what we were able to do, and say, yeah, well, that's the uniqueness about us being a black dance act and actually having a video. Enough said. And that's how forward the label was at the time. Was if I was at Beggar's Banquet or Decca or somewhere like where them other man was,
you wouldn't have got that. You don't think you would have got that support?
It wasn't even get that support. I didn't necessarily go to the label. The label came to us, so they knew what they were getting. And the other good thing about our scenario, not that it was any harder work for Clarkey, but he was a proper music head.
Oh yeah, big time.
Clarkey bought music from me,
Yeah.
and
Well, I remember Mick, and you'll remember this. I mean, there was City Sounds and Holborn.
Dave and them guys.
Yeah, before that, Mick worked behind the counter back in the day.
So all of them guys from the areas that they were all old soul boys.
Yeah.
Plus Mick had through his position, he was travelling a lot in and out of New York.
Yeah.
And at that period of time, I had a residency in a club called Mars in New York.
Yes.
I used to play on the top floor there. So that was always interesting, you know, bumping into people at the airports or the different people that you had in common. So I was always, you know, in and around something that did I go on in them times, from even the early days of Tongue, you getting the music from Timmy and that. So I used to get all doubles of, like, if he was getting that, I'd get that. And because they were serving them, man, they'd be able to serve me up and all. And I guess that's another way I was able to kind of cut my teeth, because playing at Mars, I played the same kind of set, a bit eclectic like as I do now. And that was the difference, because a lot of guys were either moving into the Chicago house scene or they were trying to be hip hop. No one was being authentic. And my thing was always, since the early 70s, it was the influence of all the music, which is why, again, I always say about London being very interesting, because it was always eclectic. It wasn't as one way as it is now, though we were soul boys and you're trying to find your tribe. Man, it was just different in them days. I mean, everything was sweet, man. You remember Horseshoe, you know, and you'd hear their man there playing
the jazz.
Oh my day, you know what I mean? Though, yeah, we were really lucky down south, man. So I guess again that would be reflected in my palate and what I would expect to absorb. Hence, what I was going to be able to regurgitate. So it's all of those things were all part and parcel of it.
Somebody said to me once, and I'd be really interested to get your take on it, that without that kind of absorption, without those different types of music that we were exposed to, there was Radio 1, there was a few little odds and ends that we used to kind of gravitate to. I'm sure you listened to the same specialist shows that were on air at the time, and the little pirate radios later on down. But without those kind of different things, we were bombarded with everything. There may not have been a soul to soul in the way it was, because that's what you take in, that's what you get out again. Is that fair?
Not really, because I think really with Soul to Soul, it's more the backdrop of London. So, you know, who knows? It could have been a punk sound system or something. But the whole idea of the movement, I think where we were growing up had an equal amount of influence to what we were putting out. Yeah. You know, because it was a mashup of all the things that drew our attention and had our interest. I mean, I was there Friday night watching Jackie Chan at late night, and at the same time, I'll be at the warehouse parties that didn't have any music in it. So a lot of people don't know those early days of them warehouse parties were just fashion joints where people would literally just go to hang out. Right, so a lot of those parties in the early days, what we will set up our physical sound system, but it never signed on. It was part of the aesthetics, and that's where I would have grown up, meeting other people and extending my horizons. So that's anything from the Wild Bunch at the time to Ray Petrie at the time to Nemeth at the time, Vivian Westwood at the time. You know, Jamie, Crunch Brothers, and you know, Dirtbox Phil and all those other guys. I was a part of all of that as well. Do you know what I mean? God, I'm old like dust. I remember.
Are we all though? But those
even remember. There's another thing shaping the way of the whole club scene. Ministry opening.
Yeah.
And toying around with all the equipment and stuff like that, because I had the links with, you know, The Shelter and Dave and all those guys in New York.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I would have been looked at as a bit left field, but you know, we were running, you know, Bozak mixers, Yuri 1620s, and all that lot from my early sound days, because those were part of the tools that I knew sonically would make us sound unique, and that's what was going on. So, you know, we started off with Sotronic to Bozak to Yuri.
Sotronic.
And even before Sotronic, the preamps were made by anyone from Bruce to Errol was building, you know. So we're coming from that era, you know, talking about platometers and different resistors against A-class amps, you know, nothing being in between the feeds and so on and so forth, isolating your turntables. Oh, mate, all of those things were brilliant. I mean, I actually miss all that, going down to the damp cellar, putting on the sound, leaving the metal work on to warm up and all them kind of thing there. And always tinkering, you know, trying to get this perfection. So once we had maybe to establish it a bit there, again, I would now be rubbing my shoulders with other technicians from people coming from different parts of the world, learning about phasing and so on and so forth, and how to be more efficient, different sounds cutting through on your mixes. And then, you know, you get to the next day, by the time, you know, I'm with 20 other people who are doing the same thing, you're exchanging ideas, get the opportunity to go and make an album. Booyah.
Well, let's talk about the singles leading into the album, but also, whilst that's going on, the entrepreneurial Jazzie B is still running, because the shop in Camden High Street is kind of like, you know, is kicking up a storm.
Yeah, I had Trevor running the shop in Tottenham Court Road.
Because you know, and listen, I've spent my money down there. My wife had a lovely leather jacket out there, like, which she used to love. But you know, that entrepreneurial spirit is still running. But the music at that point is really the kind of like the high point for Soul to Soul, you know, for the majority of people around the country. Talk us through those successful singles and that journey.
Well, the first one, like we talked about, would have been Feel Free, and the AA side was Fair Play. After us getting traction there, we already had Keep On Moving ready to go and putting the finishing touches to the album, which we couldn't conclude. And then with the velocity of Keep On Moving and the stir that Fair Play had made, I was invited to meet Jeff Aeroff and his partner, who were just about to open Virgin in LA. And for whatever reason, he just took to what I was doing. And I held his hand, and he took me through America. And like, the first thing where Jeremy is saying, what do we need to make a video for? The next single is we're out in America with these guys from LA who are just saying it's all about the visual. So the two things just kind of worked out, and those guys, we both hit the ground running because we had already conjured up massive support in New York through basically Bobby Condors was an intern working between BLS, Red Alert, and Frankie Crocker's Drive Time show. I think Armstrong and Stretch would have been on BLS, and then Red on Kiss. Anyway, we just come in at the right time. Bobby recorded it on the 08-track cartridges, which is Keep On Moving, and somehow the synchronicity would have it. Red Alert played the song 2 or 3 times straight after Frankie Crocker, who was the leading DJ in New York at the time.
Because Crocker was huge.
Yeah, so huge. We got he liked the song that much, he used it in his drive time because the song was called Keep On Moving. And at that time, Manhattan would come to a standstill in rush hour, and then the transition between him coming on and Red Alert later on. Wow, it's just like you had both ends of the bookshelf going there, and that's what happened. So at one point, throughout places like New York and that lot, you at least would have a minimum, and I'm talking conservatively, an hour's worth of airtime, which was massive.
Incredible.
Which was massive. And then, the record shot up the charts, got to, in them days, it was black charts on Billboard and that, got a bullet, and then kind of crossed over. And in those immortal words, the rest is history. Then post that, the album was a great idea because the first album was setting up to be released simultaneously with Back to Life in the Americas. Or let's talk about the rest of the world, because that had the impact coming back, the ripples there. So we were getting ready with the album release, following it up with the next single, which was Back to Life, but we hadn't concluded Back to Life. So it wasn't on the album. And we had put the original a cappella, which is However Do You Want Me, on the record, because the idea of Club Classic Volume 1 was a concept record which would lead in from the a cappella. That was to set up the drama going into the reprise, explaining what Soul to Soul was about. So that was the concept. But America didn't get it. So though I'd shipped over 280,000 records through the distributor, they shipped the records back because it didn't have, and it also had the title Club Classics. So the fact that those records had gone through the system and that, and now became cutouts, I'd done the unobvious thing of obtaining at least 70% of those returns and put them out in my own shops with my own distributors, which then all the hip-hop guys were trying to buy that because it had the a cappella on.
They could drop it over there.
And I put out the Back to Life on that album, calling the album Keep On Moving in America. So some people thought it was genius, but it was actually necessity.
It's a bit of both, though, right? Because because there's a plan there, Jazzy. You're not just kind of.
We call this a happy accident because what happened from that was that I had enormous sales in the first shipment, and they couldn't literally. It was literally Virgin's fastest selling record at that time, pre the Spice Girls coming on. I mean, we had that much of an impact. And once we hit the Midwest and the little Casey Kasem stations and that started to pick up all the records, once you hit Midwest in the Americas, which is what they call crossover, it was done. So we had a done deal on literally the first record that we released in America, and the record being an album. And we were able to jump straight to college, to the Sheds, to the big tour in 99, which was unusual to move that swiftly, but I was able to do that, and it's resonated ever since.
Yeah, and we definitely need to talk about that. I mean, I'm interested you talk a lot about America. I mean, obviously, there was huge success here, but there is something I wanted to talk to you about, and that was that moment when, at 1990, I mean, I was sitting there, it was a Sunday night, I'm in my finery, it's the Brit Awards, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is a lock. Jazzy's going to win this. It has to be. It's the biggest record of the year. It's changed the game. There's been nothing bigger. And it doesn't. You then go to America and you pick up the Grammy. Tell me about those contrasting emotions and what you were feeling at that particular point in time, at both those moments. Separated by weeks, right?
Well, the difference was we were at the Brits, and we performed at the Brits.
No, I was there.
But nobody said you were going to win a Brit. So we hadn't gone on with the intention of winning. But what we had gone on the intention was obviously making some noise. And sometimes you have to know where you are. So it was interesting that everybody else made the noise and we didn't.
That's right.
And the beauty in that was that on that evening, again, this was confirmation that we'd done something significant, is that the organisers did not present us with an award, but had us involved. And I'm not saying, yes, master there. But what ended up happening, somebody who won an award, and her name is Naina Cherry,
yeah.
she broke her award in half at the show and gave me the head of the award, and she took the base of the award. And that was her way of rewarding us, or sharing.
But acknowledging
And sharing, and in a strange way, that had much more of a bigger impact. And then when we went to the Americas, the only show I was there for, because I wasn't there for the Grammys, because I didn't have any idea we were up for a Grammy, I went back later on, just before, when we went to sort out the production for the tour, and the Grammys held another reception for us to give me the Grammys, and then I think that week or the next week, we got the Soul Train Awards, and I was physically in America to accept the awards. And then by that time, you had they had BET, which came out, and a huge presence. And then I got honoured by the NAACP, the National Advancement of Coloured People, kind of when they were a little bit together. And what was interesting about that is because I was in America domestically for a really interesting time, which was 1990. So that was everything from the Rodney King scenario through to all the other little bits and pieces that were happening. It was really an interesting time being in America and being embraced in the way we were embraced, because much of America didn't know that black people existed outside, although they had Billy Ocean, although they would have, tasted Eddie Grant and so on and so forth, and even Boney M and these other people. So there were other people outside of the Americas. But your average American wouldn't have been aware. And as a combination of the two things, that sparked a lot of attention, and the black movement was kind of on the rise then. So Chuck had come out with also Fight the Power, the massiveness of what was just taking place from Spike Lee's 40 Acres and a Mule to a lot of the other things. It was just a really interesting time.
How much do you think that you've played into a part of that? Because one of the things I wanted to ask you was, how much do you think that sound, that look, that ethos has had an effect on culture both here and in the US?
The impact of Soul to Soul was pretty powerful for America. I mean, it was so powerful that the wasn't even our groove, but the angelic vocals of Karen Wheeler ended up being like the signature. It was the soundtrack for probably one of the biggest movies that included hip hop was Belly. And that's the kind of impact that we actually had on the whole thing was, and that was us asleep. But it was a great time, and like I said, a lot of interesting happy accidents, and we became something that a lot of people wanted to duplicate.
How do you take that on? I mean, because that sound, that drum pattern has been repeated and kind of mimicked consistent now for 30 odd years. How do you feel about that when you kind of hear it coming back at you?
You know, it's flattering. You know, it kind of used to get on my nerves a little bit because you heard it so much in all different guises. But what's wonderful now is that, you know, people come and ask to use the sample or any of the parts because it's available, and I often go back to a lot of the guys and, you know, explain that's the way I started. So the concept really was to be a part of everybody's food,
Right.
and kind of managed to do that.
When you look at what you've created, Jazzie, and the influence you've had, do you see it running through day-to-day life? Do you see? Can you see that link from the sound to the shop to the music in the generation of now and what you're doing?
I'll be fair with you. I don't even watch that. I watch my children,
Right.
and I see the effect of what we've been able to do, and me being a part of Soul to Soul has had that effect on my family and how they're flexing and the opportunities that they're having. And that's really maybe what I see more, possibly what I'm more proud of, outside of, you know, when somebody does come along and, you know, express the fact that it had this adverse effect on their life. And, you know, I'd like to believe it was more than just the music, but if the music touched you in that way, it was because of the lifestyle of what we were leading at that time. So,
But, you know, I mean, the problem is some, as you will know, the closest some people get to you is that piece of music they hear that's gonna. So that must fill you with some sense of gratitude and kind of happiness that you've been able to kind of at least kind of, you know, subconsciously kind of touch people in different ways, and and also influence them in what they've done, because, you know, not only have you kind of made what was one of the greatest Black British albums of all time, you created a sound, you created a genre, you created a culture that still lives on. I mean, that's got to mean something to you. You know, the young boy from Hornsey probably couldn't have thought of that when he was kind of growing up, pushing his sound around in a shopping trolley, right, to get from place to place.
I guess if you put it like that, very proud of it, and with everybody, it's not me alone. You know what I mean? It took all the others to believe in what I was doing at that time, and then playing their part to their best ability, allowing this situation to happen. And I can tell you straight up, none of us was dreaming about it being around, other than the fact that when me and Nels decided to, you know, we're going to go with the title Club Classics, because we really wanted to make an indelible mark on our community, music community, everything they'd given to us and what we were giving back, which is why I'm, you know, quite proud of the fact of when people are sampling it, legit or otherwise, it's testament to, you know, everybody's input and how good a project that is.
The other thing which I think is really important, Jazz, and that I look at in your journey is that you just didn't bring yourself on this journey. You brought a whole crew of people with you as well that you've lifted up, whether it be Rose, Karen, Dada, H. You know, there's been a lot of people that have kind of, you know, it's very unfair to say ridden your coattails, but they've been with you, and you've kind of gone, you know what, through Soul to Soul, through your collective powers, everyone's come up together and everyone's enjoyed that success.
Yeah.
How do you see that reflected, what your template being reflected now? Do you see it anywhere else in the music business of today?
I'm not sure that I've looked for it. And if you talk about similarities or whatever, I suppose, you know, they were so solid, and what those guys, what Mega does, or what he was doing with that scenario, I think that's interesting. And I think if you look in reflection today, just look at Big Mike and Stormzy, what's happening with that. And, pre that, there was, all the other, from Congo to, all the other sort of stuff that's been evolved from there, your Wookiees and so on and so forth. So the sound system feed a lot of people, a lot of people. And, their input has been equally as important as how the journey started, because it's always been about maintenance. And that's one of the things that a lot of the youth sounds never did, was maintaining their systems. I remember back in the old days, Count Barry's sound, and he had a Valve amp and a beautiful amp case, and it used to be the shiniest chrome, because every Sunday me and one of his sons would be using Brasso and polishing it. And just seeing I can see the amp. I remember trying to mimic it at school. And again, I'd be in bluesies and stuff, and just seeing the dim light of that sort of thing. And that would send me into a trance or into a dream, as it were. And in reflection now, looking back, close to 40 years later, from the release of my record, still got that misty thing. And what's wonderful is that, the guys I mentioned previously are out there doing their thing, and that possibly could have been attributed to the doors that, Soul to Soul managed to open.
Jazzy, I think there's no doubt about it. I think, when all of us that have gone on a journey, your torch, the torch you carried, has been passed to another man down the road. I think that's clear by the lineage and the development we've seen in Black British music and Black British culture, but also Black British business and the entrepreneurial spirit, because that's something else which is really, really important in this story as well. But it's the music and the business, because it is the music business, came together. But you were the first person that was probably able to marry them both together really, really well.
Yeah, I mean,
when you look back at it.
Yeah, by design it was, because I had to monetize it, and it had to be done seriously, because we had responsibilities, you know what I mean? So in a haphazard way, we were able to turn it into some kind of business. And I guess, again, choosing the right people around you, we were able to develop it, nurture it, and allow it to grow.
So when you look back now, you're talking about 2023, if you're going to give advice to the next generation of young producers, what would it be?
My advice to everyone would be just obviously keep their ears open, and no one's going to hear the tunes if you just got them at home. You know what I mean? Put your ideas out there, be open-minded, and just believe that collectively you'll gain a lot more than you would as an individual. And the basic core of that is, perseverance. Believe in yourself and just keep doing what you're doing.
So you've been sound man, DJ, musician, producer, entrepreneur, definitely a visionary.
Don't forget my paper round.
Yeah, we can put the paper round in and sound and tape op as well. But when you kind of look back, which of those has given you the most pleasure?
DJ, selector.
For
my sound.
Right.
Which inevitably is for myself. So, being comfortable to select and play. And, I love music. I live music. So any kind of music, I love it.
And looking back, as you sit here now, did you ever think, as that young teenager, that you'd be able to sit here 40, 45 years' time and kind of go, what a journey, that it was what you wanted? Did you ever look back and think, it's not real?
I've never known what I wanted, but I did have the balls to go ahead and call the records club classics. So I think everything else is in the detail, and that's not being arrogant or anything. That's just about that's how you got to believe in yourself. And for me, you know, that's how great the project is, and I'm still living it today, which is how much I believe in what I've done.
The shops, the sounds, the culture. All I can say, Jazzie, is that, you know, for someone that's known you for a hot minute, it's been an absolute pleasure just kind of seeing your journey, reveling in it, being able to celebrate your success. Do you think of yourself as a pioneer, as an icon?
No, I'm just my mum's baby, you know what I mean? Getting on with it.
Listen, that is probably as good a place as anywhere to finish. Jazzie B, OBE, thank you for being a part of this Union Black British producers that have produced the best of the global albums. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Oh, God bless it.